Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're jumping headfirst into a stack of material today, all about a topic that gets right to the core of being ready for anything. Wilderness survival.
Mm.
But listen, this isn't about, living off the grid for years on end.
Right.
It's focused squarely on the modern survival scenario, which, the data shows us, often wraps up within about 72 hours.
That's right. And our guide for this deep dive is excerpts from a book called 98.6 Degrees, The Art of Keeping Your Ass Alive by Cody Lundin.
Okay?
It's got a really blunt, practical approach, cuts through a lot of the noise you might hear elsewhere.
Absolutely. So our mission with this deep dive,
Yeah.
to pull out the absolute most critical insights from this book.
Yeah.
We want to help you understand what truly matters when things go sideways outdoors, focusing on the core principles that could save your life.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, what surprised me reading this material is just how much of it boils down to some incredibly simple yet powerful ideas. Okay, let's unpack this.
Sounds good. Well, one of the first things this book hammers home is that survival is overwhelmingly psychological.
Really? How so?
It says, pretty directly, that in a real crunch, all the training and gear in the world matter less than if you're just a mental and emotional basket case.
So it's not about how many gadgets you have, but what's going on inside your head.
Yeah.
That feels kind of counterintuitive to the image we often see.
Exactly. Your attitude, your self-esteem, even your ability to find a bit of humor in a terrible situation. The book argues these things directly influence your physical state. Your heart rate, your hormones, your body chemistry. It puts it simply, your psychology creates your physiology.
Fascinating. So if mindset is that critical, how does the book suggest you cultivate that resilience before you're in trouble?
Prior training is key. It's not just about learning skills, it's about repetition.
Okay.
Practicing simple things over and over creates a deeper groove in your limbic system,
So it cuts down reaction time.
Right, cuts down reaction time and, crucially, conserves precious mental and physical energy when you're already stressed and running low on resources.
Right.
You essentially train yourself for faster adaptation when you hit those reaction phases the book talks about. Recognition of the problem.
Yeah.
The physiological reaction speed, whether you adapt or don't, and the steps you then take. The goal is faster, more effective adaptation.
Which, when you zoom out, sounds a lot like that classic piece of advice, right? The 7
Yeah,
Ps.
it does. Proper prior planning prevents piss-poor performance.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate distillation of be prepared. It means doing your homework before you go out, researching your destination, understanding the weather patterns, potential trail conditions.
Identifying dangers.
Exactly. Identifying specific dangers of that area. Then using that research to build realistic gear lists, setting proper timelines, having alternate plans, and figuring out emergency backups.
Okay.
That upfront preparation is the bedrock the whole structure rests on.
All right. So you've got the right mindset, hopefully built through practice and planning.
Mm-hmm.
But the wilderness still has plenty of tangible ways to try and kill you.
Oh, yeah.
The book lays out a list of enemies you'll face.
Right, there are the obvious ones. Things like intense anxiety and fear. The book calls them voracious killers when mixed with imagination.
Wow.
Then there's pain, injury, illness, the elements like cold and heat, thirst, hunger, wetness, fatigue, sleep deprivation. Those are the ones everyone thinks of.
But what really caught my eye were the subtle enemies the book mentions. They seem almost benign compared to hypothermia.
And yet, they can be just as insidious, often working together. Boredom, loneliness, isolation. Those can chip away at your resolve. Complacency is a big one, thinking it won't happen to me or getting sloppy. The simple desire for comfort, which can make you stop doing what you should be doing.
Right, taking the easy pass.
Exactly. Stubbornness, a refusal to abandon a dangerous course of action.
And this one baffled me.
Yeah.
Promises. How is a promise an enemy?
Ah, yes, like get home, itis. Telling yourself, or worse, telling others you'll be back by a certain time no matter what.
Oh, I see. That pressure.
That creates immense pressure to push through conditions or ignore warning signs you shouldn't. These subtle enemies, precisely because they aren't dramatic, can slowly erode your good judgment piece by piece until you make a critical mistake.
That makes sense. And fear, one of the obvious ones, seems to play into these subtle issues by impairing judgment. What does the book say about the physical effects of fear?
Fear is a physiological cascade. It significantly impairs blood flow,
Okay.
which directly contributes to problems regulating your temperature, whether you're trying to stay warm or cool. It absolutely demolishes your judgment, leads to irrational behavior, tunnel vision. You can't think clearly.
Wow.
And this is critical for kit design. It severely impairs fine and complex motor skills.
Like trying to light a match.
Forget it under intense stress, trying to tie a small knot, light a finicky match, thread a needle.
Yeah. So when you're choosing gear, lean towards stuff you can use even if your hands are shaking.
Exactly. The book stresses favoring gear that relies on gross motor skills where possible. Running, pushing, scraping a magnesium bar. Your body holds on to those larger muscle movements better under duress.
Okay.
If a crucial tool requires delicate handling, you might be out of luck when you need it most.
All right, shifting from the mental game and the external threats, the book focuses intensely on one single critical constant you absolutely must manage above all else. What is it?
Keeping your core body temperature right around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit.
Ah, the title of the book.
Exactly. The book puts a huge spotlight on this, identifying hypothermia too cold or hyperthermia too hot as the #1 killers in outdoor survival scenarios.
It seems so simple on the surface, but the environment is constantly working against that stable temperature. It dives deep into the physics of heat transfer.
It does, and understanding these is key. There's conduction, direct contact with something cold or hot.
Like sitting on cold ground.
That's a classic example, yeah. But even hot ground can be an issue, potentially delaminating your shoe soles. And water is brutal, 25 times more conductive than air, sucking heat out of you rapidly.
Wow, 25 times.
Yeah. Standing still, conduction might be minor, maybe 2% of heat loss, but add contact, especially wet contact, and it's significant.
Then there's convection.
That's heat loss or gain through air or water movement. Wind is the big one here.
Wind chill.
Think wind chill in the cold, or how hot winds in the desert can evaporate sweat so fast you get little cooling effect but still lose water rapidly.
Radiation.
Heat transfer via waves. The sun's shortwave radiation you absorb, especially with darker clothing.
Right.
Your body constantly emits long-wave radiation. If you're not trapping that radiant heat with clothing or shelter, you're losing energy.
And the head. I read that part. It was surprising.
Oh yeah, the head is a massive radiator. Unprotected, it can account for roughly 70% of your total heat loss or gain, like a smokestack.
70%?
Yeah.
From your head. I mean, I knew hats were important, but I wouldn't have guessed that much.
It's a huge lever for temperature regulation. Huge.
Okay.
And then there's evaporation heat loss when liquid turns to gas.
Sweating.
Sweating is your body's primary cooling mechanism in heat, but if your clothes get wet in the cold, that evaporation is deadly, sucking heat right off your skin.
And finally, respiration. Breathing.
Yes, losing heat and precious water vapor just by breathing. This is particularly significant in cold, dry air.
How much?
The book mentions losing up to 2 quarts of water a day just through respiration at -40 degrees Fahrenheit.
2 quarts just breathing.
Wow.
So your body's constantly fighting these forces.
Right.
What happens if it loses the battle and your core temp starts to drift?
Well, below 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, things degrade rapidly. The book notes you pretty much lose your ability to help yourself below 92 degrees Fahrenheit.
92. That's not much margin.
No. On the heat side, cells literally start to melt around 107 degrees Fahrenheit. Your body throws everything at it, vasoconstriction and vasodilation to shunt blood. Shivering, which increases your metabolism 5 times, but burns calories rapidly.
Uses energy you might not have.
Exactly. And non-shivering thermogenesis. It's also key that cold weather deaths aren't just in blizzards. Many happen in temperatures between 30–50 degrees Fahrenheit.
Really, that seems quite mild.
Because people aren't prepared for the wet and the chill. Heat illness progresses from cramps to exhaustion and eventually the potentially fatal heat stroke.
The author includes some personal anecdotes about temperature acclimation, like bathing less in cold weather, or reusing shirts for insulation buildup. How does the book present these ideas?
He presents them as examples of biological acclimation, how the body can adapt over time. But he's very clear, this is a supplement to preparedness, not a replacement for proper gear and planning.
Got it. So don't rely on it.
Right. It's about understanding your body's capabilities, but not pushing past safe limits without preparation.
Which makes a perfect bridge to what the book calls your first line of defense.
Absolutely. Clothing. It is presented as your most effective tool for regulating that core temperature and essentially your personal shelter.
More reliable than fire, even.
Statistically, in a short-term survival situation, yes. Because it's always with you and relatively easy to adjust.
And the system is simple but crucial. Layering.
Exactly. A base layer to manage moisture, wick it away, and provide a little insulation.
Then insulation layers.
Yeah, layers you can add or remove easily as conditions or your activity level changes.
And the outer shell.
And an environmental layer to block wind and rain while still being breathable, hopefully, to vent moisture. These layers are critical because they trap dead airspace, and that's what provides the real insulation.
Material science comes into play here. Wool, synthetics, cotton. They all have their pros and cons, the book highlights.
I do. Wool is highly praised. Poor heat conductor, great insulator thanks to those hollow fibers.
Holds heat even when damp.
It can absorb a significant amount of moisture, 35–55% of its weight, before it even feels cold, and it retains heat better than synthetics while drying. Plus, it's naturally flame retardant.
Downsides. Bulky. Can be bulky, yeah.
Synthetics like nylon.
Good insulators, quick drying, very lightweight. A tight weave can offer excellent sun protection, too. Pretty reliable all around, usually.
And then there's the controversial one, cotton.
Ah, yes. The cotton kills mantra.
But the book has a nuance.
It gives a nuanced view. Cotton is excellent in hot, dry heat.
Why?
Its hydrophilic properties mean it absorbs sweat and allows it to evaporate slowly, which is very cooling, like nature's air conditioner.
But in cold or wet?
Deadly. It loses almost all its insulation value when wet, and that evaporative cooling becomes evaporative freezing. Sucks the heat right out of you.
And down.
Amazing insulator when dry, incredibly warm for its weight. Lightweight, compressible.
Right.
Like cotton, it's pretty useless if it gets wet, so you need to be extremely careful about keeping down dry.
The book strongly emphasizes running cool in cold temperatures to avoid sweating in the first place. Venting moisture from your layers is absolutely critical in cold environments.
And in the heat, clothing is still your friend.
Totally. It protects you from the sun's harmful UV rays. The book notes UV can even degrade things like surveyor's tape.
No way.
Yeah. Clothing allows sweat to evaporate efficiently from the surface and prevents sunburn, which is surprisingly dangerous because sunburn impairs your body's ability to sweat and cool itself.
I never thought about that aspect of sunburn.
Yeah, it messes with your thermoregulation. Darker colors absorb more radiant heat, but the protection from the sun is key. The author even touches on old-school alternatives to sunscreen, like carbon from fire for UV protection.
Like charcoal.
Yeah, though that's obviously not for general use, more of a historical note.
Okay, clothing is your first defense. After that, what's the immediate critical need the book focuses on?
Water. Absolutely water.
More critical than food.
Oh, much faster. You will absolutely die faster from dehydration and hyperthermia than from hunger. The book makes a point that by the time you feel thirsty, you are already significantly dehydrated, maybe 1 to 1.5 quarts low.
So thirst is a lagging indicator.
Very much so. And
Yeah.
paradoxically, the thirst mechanism can actually stop working when you become severely dehydrated, giving you a false sense of security.
That's terrifying. And how much water do you actually lose?
Even at rest, you're losing over 1.5 quarts a day, minimum.
And if you're working hard?
Under exertion in the heat, you can lose up to a gallon an hour.
A gallon an hour.
Yeah. So the standard preparedness advice of 1 gallon per person per day is, according to this book, bogus under real strenuous conditions and heat. It's just not enough.
What about all the survival shows and books that talk about finding water in cacti or building complex solar stills?
The book is extremely skeptical of those for a modern short-term survival scenario.
Why is that?
They're often presented as unreliable field experiments. Trying to build a solar still might cause you to lose more water through sweat and exertion than you ever gain from the still.
So net loss.
Could be. Relying on methods you've only seen in a book or a photo without extensive practice in real conditions is presented as, frankly, dangerous. Stick to finding reliable sources if possible.
So find water, but then you have to treat it.
Right.
What's the book's recommendation there?
Tincture of iodine 2% is the preferred method discussed. Simple, effective.
How much?
The baseline is 5 drops per quart for clear, temperate water, letting it sit for at least 30 minutes.
What if the water looks murky?
For questionable or very cold water, you might need up to 10 drops, maybe even longer sit times. The book explains that things like turbidity or cloudiness or certain chemical compounds like nitrogen from pond scum can bind up the iodine, reducing its effectiveness, so you need more.
Is there a way to tell if it worked?
It gives a rough field test. If the water is yellowish light brown and tastes strong enough to gag a camel, you've likely achieved a sufficient level of disinfection, around 0.6 ppm. Not precise, but a guideline.
Any other hydration tricks or tips from the source?
Drink cool to cold liquids, not ice cold, as that can sometimes cause stomach cramps. Your urine should ideally be clear. That's a good sign.
Practical stuff.
Simple things like breathing through your nose and limiting talking can help conserve moisture. Alcohol is heavily discouraged. It's a diuretic.
Makes you pee more.
Right. You need about 8 ounces of water to process 1 ounce of alcohol. Plus, it impairs judgment and it suppresses shivering, which you might need to generate heat.
Okay. What about sports drinks?
The book does mention carbonated liquids may absorb faster and throws out the possibility of using Alka-Seltzer in water for electrolytes. But it strongly cautions against overly concentrated electrolyte solutions, which can actually hinder absorption. Dilute them properly. And a huge takeaway here, which the book repeats, is that there is no adaptation to dehydration.
You can't just tough it out.
Nope. Being tough or trying to push through it doesn't work. The military learned this through hard experience. There's also this phenomenon called voluntary dehydration,
What's that?
where people simply don't drink enough, even when water is available, often because they're focused on other things or underestimate their need. You have to consciously make yourself drink.
Okay, you've got your clothing sorted, you're hydrated, but you're still lost. The next priority is getting found. The book gives us a crucial time frame here.
Right. The average modern survival scenario, from the moment someone realizes you're overdue until search and rescue finds you, is around 72 hours.
3 days.
If they're looking, that's the key.
Which leads to the single most critical step you need to take before you even step out the door.
Leaving a detailed game plan with not just 1, but 2 trusted people. This isn't a quick, hey, might be out late text. It needs to be thorough.
What goes into that thorough plan?
Well, where you're going, be specific. A map is great, even a homemade one. But a written list of locations, routes, and destinations is essential.
When you'll be back.
Crucial, when you expect to be back. Who is in your party?
Your vehicle.
What vehicle you're driving? License plate. And importantly, why you're taking the trip. Hiking, fishing, climbing. This helps SAR understand your potential activity and likely location.
And then stick to it.
The book can't stress enough how important it is to then stick to that plan. If nobody knows you're missing or where you intended to go, they don't know where to start looking. It's a huge waste of resources, potentially fatal for you.
And it's worth remembering who is often doing the searching.
Absolutely. The book points out that 99% of ground search and rescue efforts are carried out by volunteers.
Wow, 99%.
Yeah. So having a solid plan helps them help you efficiently, and frankly, being courteous and not causing false alarms is important for their time and resources.
What about phones? GPS.
It cautions against relying solely on technology like cell phones. Battery life, terrain, and weather make them unreliable in the wilderness. Rescues can be delayed by conditions even if SAR is activated. Don't bet your life on a signal.
So, mindset, planning, managing temperature, securing water, telling someone where you're going. Now, your survival kit. What's its core purpose, according to the book?
The kit's primary function is to help you regulate that core body temperature and enable you to signal for rescue.
That's it. Temp and signaling.
Primarily. All while helping you conserve energy and improve your situation. The book argues that in a typical 72-hour modern scenario, almost everything else people pack in kits is statistically fluff. Strong word, but that's the argument.
And the book has a strong preference when it comes to kits. Homemade or modified over commercial. Why?
He makes a very compelling case. With a homemade kit, you know exactly what's inside, often because you put it there or modified it.
No mystery bags.
No mysterious sealed bags. You know how to use every component because you chose it less likely to pack useless items you saw online.
Right.
You can easily replace items when they get used or age. No weird, outdated gizmos. Building and customizing it gives you confidence.
Avoids bad ideas.
You avoid what the book calls urban armchair survival instructor. Bad ideas often found in novelty kits. And crucially, you can test components in conditions relevant to where you go outdoors. Does that plastic container handle the cold? Does the lighter work?
What are the key characteristics of a good kit then, whether you make it or modify it?
It needs to be relevant to your specific environment, lightweight and portable, waterproof, durable.
Multi-use items.
Definitely contain multi-use components, include calorie-conserving components, things that help you save energy, be panic-proofed,
Meaning simple to use.
Simple and intuitive to use under stress, yeah. Easily purchased or made, affordable, field-tested by you, and fundamentally simple. Keep it simple. So, the priorities for the kit components, after your clothing, water, and signaling capabilities, which are paramount, are regulating core temperature, signaling, and conserving energy.
What about first aid? That seems crucial.
It is important, definitely. But the book frames its role in a short-term wilderness survival scenario as primarily stabilizing a patient for transport. Remember, most rescuers aren't medical professionals. 95% of ground searchers are volunteers.
So focus on the basics, ABCs.
Exactly. Airway, breathing, circulation, stabilize. You need to tailor your first aid kit to your likely needs, like including things for cuts if you're using sharp tools, and critically, practice your first aid and CPR skills beforehand. Knowing how to use it is key.
Let's dive into some of the specific components the book details and why they're chosen, starting with containers.
2 heavy-duty freezer bags, like a gallon and a quart size, are highly recommended.
Just freezer bags.
They're surprisingly tough, dirt cheap, and collapse down to nothing. Excellent for carrying and storing water or keeping things dry.
And the condom, I saw that mentioned.
And yes, a non-lubricated condom is mentioned as an incredibly compact way to carry a large volume of water in a pinch, definitely multi-use if unexpected.
Signaling items.
A peeless plastic whistle, brightly colored, uses almost no energy, incredibly loud. Works even when wet or cold, though sound doesn't travel as far in dense woods.
Surveyor tape.
Bright-colored survey tape is essential. The Hansel and Gretel method of marking your path so you or rescuers can find it. Also for signaling from a distance and can be used as weak cordage. Be aware that UV rays can degrade it over time, so check it.
And a signal mirror. Glass, not plastic.
A signal mirror, specifically glass, is preferred over flimsy acrylic ones because it's much more reflective. More bang for your buck, signal-wise.
How do you actually aim that signal mirror effectively? That always seemed tricky.
The book gives a clear method. Hold the mirror close to your face, find the sun, and look through the sighting hole or mesh.
Okay.
You'll see a glowing ball of light reflected back onto the mesh or your hand. Keep track of that ball, look at your target, a plane, car, distant person through the hole, and move the mirror until that glowing ball drops onto your target.
Then flash it.
Then just gently rock the mirror back and forth to send flashes towards the target area. Practice helps. Bright-colored clothing, like a cap or a space blanket, also significantly aids visibility. Be seen.
Fire starters are a classic survival item. What's the book's take, and what methods are recommended?
Multiple methods are key because conditions can make one fail. Redundancy.
Like matches.
Paraffin-coated, strike-anywhere matches in a truly waterproof container are a staple. He notes the difference between strike-anywhere matches with phosphorus on the head and safety matches, which need the box striker, so always carry the striker if using safety or specialty matches. Specialty matches like storm matches burn hotter, but still might need that box.
Okay.
He also grounds this by saying a single match is only about 1 BTU of heat. Your body produces 300 BTU/hour just resting. Fire takes work.
What are their methods?
A disposable butane lighter. Simple, reliable usually.
Which kind?
Get a brightly colored, non-opaque one so you can see the fuel level. Adjustable flame is a bonus. Non-child-proof is arguably better under stress.
Easier to work.
Yeah, it's simple, uses gross motor skills, and even if the fuel is gone, the striker wheel can produce sparks for tinder. They don't work great when very cold, though. The fuel doesn't vaporize well.
And the magnesium bar, that block thing.
A magnesium block fire starter with a hacksaw blade or similar sturdy scraper. It's waterproof.
How does it work?
You scrape a pile of magnesium shavings onto your tinder-like dime-sized pile, then strike the embedded mish-metal ferrocerium rod, the flint part, into the shavings to ignite them. They burn super hot.
Screeving is a gross motor skill.
Right. Easier under stress. Use the back of your knife blade or a dedicated scraper like a hacksaw blade, not your knife's cutting edge. Don't dull your knife.
Good tip.
The mish metal rod also produces a very bright, windproof spark that can be used as a temporary signal visible with night vision, apparently.
For tinder, anything specific recommended?
Cotton balls soaked with petroleum jelly. Incredible tinder. Yeah. They light easily even when wet and burn for a good while, giving you time to get bigger material going. Petroleum jelly is also multi-use as a lubricant chafe protection.
How to store them?
Store them in a small waterproof container like a film vial, maybe with colored tape on it for visibility so you don't lose it.
And a magnifying lens.
Credit card size, simple magnifying lens. Uses the sun's radiant energy to start fires, obviously needs sun.
Multi-use.
Also multi-use for reading maps or getting out splinters. cheap, compact, and lightweight.
Cutting edge. The knife. Big topic.
The book is pragmatic here. Simplicity over specialization. Pick a knife you're proficient with, one suited to the tasks you'll likely face in your specific area. Don't need some crazy Rambo knife.
Good features to look for.
Key features: a wide sharpening bevel, as it's easier to sharpen in the field, and a straight, pointed tip, which is useful for pounding or drilling into wood if needed.
In practice.
Practice using your knife. Practice sharpening it. Make the handle or sheath a bright color so you don't lose it. A lost knife is useless.
Shelter and insulation components in the kit. Besides clothing.
2 55-gallon barrel liners or 3 large, heavy-duty leaf bags made of plastic.
Trash bag.
Basically, yeah. Simple, cheap, can be used as a rain suit, a ground sheet, or a basic tube tent or shelter.
Downsides.
Plastic acts as a vapor barrier, which can trap moisture inside, so be mindful of ventilation. Don't get wet from your own sweat. Using bright-colored bags, like highway cleanup bags, adds visibility.
And replace them.
Rotate them annually, as plastic can become brittle over time, especially with temperature swings.
Space blanket.
A heavy-duty space blanket, preferably bright orange or red, not just silver. Lightweight, compact, reflects radiant heat back to you, and is a great signal panel.
They're kind of flimsy, though, aren't they?
The cheap ones are. Get a decent heavy-duty one. They can be a pain to refold, but they work.
Hat and bandana.
A bright wool or synthetic stocking cap is absolutely essential. Remember that head neck heat loss we talked about, 70%. And a bright cotton bandana is just a multi-use classic. Sweatband, dust mask, a pre-filter for water, bandage. Next, cordage.
Like rope.
Dental floss, unwaxed and unflavored. Surprisingly strong. The book describes it as rip your head off strong.
Really, dental floss.
Yeah, cheap, compact, multi-use for repairs, fishing line, snares maybe. Take it out of the bulky plastic container.
And regular cord.
And 550-pound test parachute cord paracord. Brightly colored for summer or maybe darker for other seasons, depending on where you are. Provides strong, reliable cordage for shelters, repairs, whatever.
Food isn't the immediate priority the way water is in a 72-hour scenario, but the kit includes something for energy.
Right. 2 candy or nutrition bars, simple sugars, carbs.
Why, if you can, fast.
You can survive for weeks without food. But simple sugars and carbohydrates give you a quick energy boost when you're hitting the wall and need to keep moving, maybe to self-rescue or build shelter.
Helps you function.
High glycemic index foods give that quick blood sugar spike. You also actually need some carbs to efficiently burn your fat reserves for energy, so it helps unlock your stored fuel.
The book also gets into something it calls Uncle Pepe's patented power pack stack.
Ow.
That sounds interesting. Kind of controversial.
It's presented as a specific tool for combating severe fatigue, a mix of caffeine and ephedrine. Let's be clear, this is what the book describes, not necessarily an endorsement across the board.
Okay, what's the idea?
Caffeine, trimethylxanthine, works by blocking adenosine receptors, boosting adrenaline, and impacting dopamine pathways. Gives you that alert feeling.
Ephedrine.
Ephedrine, derived from plants like ephedra or ma huang, is a stimulant with a history of use. Though it's regulated or banned in many places now, it boosts heart rate and metabolism.
And the dosage details the book provides.
It gives dosages like 200 milligrams of caffeine plus 25 milligrams of ephedrine as a typical starting point for a large male, recommending half that for smaller individuals or females.
Important cautions.
It strongly cautions against exceeding 400 milligram caffeine or 50 milligram ephedrine, stating unequivocally that more is not better, and can lead to worse symptoms like jitters, nausea, and eventual lethargy, a crash.
Water needed.
It also stresses the stack is a water hog. You absolutely must take it with a significant amount of water, like half a quart to a full quart. Dehydration makes it worse.
Or sleep effects.
And any sleep you get between doses significantly intensifies the effect, so be aware of that.
So it's presented as?
It's presented as one tool to consider for specific, dire circumstances of extreme fatigue, where staying awake and functional is critical, not a standard practice or endorsement for abuse, and emphasizes user responsibility and knowing the risks.
Finally, navigation tools. Map and compass.
A topographical map, specifically a 7.5-minute map, if possible for detail, and a good base plate compass.
But there's a big caveat.
These are incredibly powerful tools if and only if you know how to use them. That requires practice, ideally taking classes. You can't just buy them and expect them to work magic.
Map more useful than compass alone?
Arguably, yes. The map shows terrain features, landmarks, water sources, trails. A compass just tells you direction. The book warns that carrying these tools without proficiency can actually be dangerous.
Oh, so.
Creates false confidence that leads you further astray. I have a map. I must know where I'm going, but you don't.
All these components and skills, from the kit to the mindset, loop back to the idea of conserving energy and building the capacity to endure hardship.
Exactly. Conserving energy isn't just about physical effort. It's about making smart choices.
Like,
Regulating your temp with clothing so your body isn't burning extra calories just staying warm or cool. Working at a sustainable pace, around 60% of your maximum output, which allows you to burn fat more efficiently instead of just carbs.
plan your work.
Prioritizing tasks mentally before you expend physical energy. Less wasted effort. And critically, avoiding sweating in the cold that wastes calories, wastes precious water, and gets your clothing wet, which is a massive heat drain. Stay dry in the cold.
And enduring hardship. That's more than just being tough, right?
Yeah.
It's mental.
It is. It's actively fighting the desire for comfort, fighting complacency. That little voice saying, just sit down for a bit longer, even when you need to gather wood.
Training helps.
The book argues that realistic training builds true mental and physical toughness, creating that deep-seated, I know I can handle this mindset, rather than just hoping I think I can.
Confidence from experience.
It's about knowing your limits and pushing them safely during practice, so you know your true capabilities when it counts, not finding out for the first time when your life depends on it.
So we've taken this deep dive into staying alive outdoors, guided by the practical wisdom in 98.6 degrees. What's crystal clear is that while having the right gear is important,
It is.
your mental preparation before you even leave, understanding basic physics of how your body interacts with the environment, and having fundamental physiological knowledge are absolutely paramount.
Couldn't agree more.
Survival in this context isn't some romanticized notion of living like a primitive person. It's often a short, intense period focused on staying stable, making smart decisions, and enabling rescue.
Yeah, it's about managing a crisis for usually about 72 hours.
What really resonated with me from this material is that fierce emphasis on simple, proven methods over complex or exotic ones,
Right.
and the stark reality of the consequences if you overlook those absolute basics. Your clothing, securing water, making sure someone knows where you are.
It's a powerful challenge to a lot of commercial hype and maybe some common assumptions, really putting the onus of preparedness back on you, the individual.
Thinking about all this, the focus on core principles, the blunt assessment of priorities, the skepticism towards complexity, if something is seemingly straightforward as keeping your body at 98.6 degrees and having a plan, can be the ultimate difference between life and death in the wilderness. What simple but critical fundamentals might you be overlooking in the complex wilderness of your everyday modern life?
No.
Something to chew on.